Hi, everybody. It's Tamara from Moogly, and fingers crossed, we are now live on YouTube. It is February 2nd, 2022. And I am going to hit refresh here. Oh, looks like I am live. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Good to be with you today. Hope you're doing well. I just finished up talking to everybody over on the Moogly Facebook page. There will be a link in the description here on YouTube where you can check that out, as well as all the links for the latest giveaways and patterns and things happening on Moogly, and the pattern we're talking about today, which is the Love is Cold ear warmer. You can see right here. Now, I don't have the original piece anymore. I designed this back in 2015. And if you've been following my YouTube channel for a very long time, you may have seen I have a tutorial for this up already. However, that tutorial is really only for, I want to say it's round 7. It's the tricky round, basically, or what I thought was going to be the trickiest round. Back in 2015, I wasn't really in the space where I was making like full video tutorials. Just hadn't, I'd only been blogging for a few years, which I guess at that point had been a little while. It'd been about 4 years, but relatively new in this career that I was kind of making up as I went along. So I just wasn't there yet. But now I'm making full tutorials for a lot of my patterns. And that video has had so many comments from people still today. I'm still getting comments saying, can you please come back and make a full tutorial for this pattern? So even if I can't say it, I'm going to try and make it today. So we're going to be working through it. Not the full-sized one. That would take several hours, which is a lot to ask for a live or even a tutorial video. But we'll be making a small abbreviated version of it, but I'm going to try and hit all those rows so you can see how it does come together. So thank you so much, Michelle, Lynn, Crystalline, Chris, Kathy, Paula, Irene, everybody who tunes in today. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions, if there's part of this pattern, if you've encountered it before and you know that, oh gosh, this is actually the tricky part, do speak up. Let me know if you need to see me do something again. I'll be trying to kind of watch the comments here at the same time as I go. So let's go ahead and bring in our overhead camera and we'll go ahead and get started with this one. So, okay, here we have the Love is Cold ear warmer. This is the PDF that's available for purchase, and the pattern is also available for free on my blog. I'll be adding a link to this tutorial to the PDF when we're done. So if you want to, you can start this pattern out with foundation double crochets, or, which is how I like to do it, or you can start with just a chain. But the point is, there's 2 different sizes. You start with a chain of either 52 or 62, and then you skip those first few chains and end up with 50 or 60 stitches, depending on the size you want to make for the first row. So you can make those by doing a chain and then double crochet into that chain, or you can do foundation double crochet. I really like to do the foundation double crochet for this because it just gives a much stretchier result. Here you can see is a tiny little sample I was working up earlier to practice this, to make sure I was familiar with it again. And I tried it both ways, and you can do it with the chain and crochet back into the chain, but like I say, with the benefit of hindsight, it's been several years since 2015, I would definitely recommend starting this out with a foundation double crochet. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do here today. I'm going to start with my slip knot on my hook, and you can see here too, I'm using different colors. The original was made with Red Heart with Love, which I'm still using right here, and a USI 5.5 millimeter hook. There we are. There's the Red Heart with Love, but I'm going to use different colors today so that they're a little bit easier to see. Red and white both tend to get a little funky on camera. So I'm going to go ahead and just start. I'm going to do a smaller size. I'm going to start with 30 foundation double crochets. This would be a teeny tiny one. It would not fit on a person really, but it will be good for demonstrating all the stitches today and not turning it into, hopefully, a 2-hour long live. We'll just be able to get through the main things here. So I'm just doing some foundation double crochets, and if you haven't seen how to do foundation double crochets before, I do have a separate tutorial for it on the YouTube channel. So for the sake of time today, I'm just going to go ahead and get these made. But like I say, if you want to, you can certainly work a standard chain and double crochet back into that chain to make those double crochets. So I just need to get 30 of them for our first row for our sample. But again, in the full size, you'd want either 50 or 60 depending on the size you are making. So if you guys have tried this before, or if you've tried this pattern before, do let me know what you think of it. It's a pretty simple ear warmer with just a couple of funky moves in the middle to give you a really pretty row of hearts. So I had hoped to get this done before Valentine's Day this year, but it just didn't happen. We had too many other things to get to. But this is a great ear warmer, of course, for year-round. It isn't just for Valentine's Day. I think the heart motif is pretty universal. And of course, you can work it in any colors, not just the traditional red and white. So I'm just trying to get through these foundation double crochets here. You can see I tend to work them sideways. I've had people comment that before. It's not, you know, the traditional working back across. I'm actually sort of holding it more like a Tunisian crochet, which in a way, if you think about foundation stitches, they are. But that's probably a bigger topic for another day. But I always tell people, don't be afraid of Tunisian. You're just making loops, and don't be afraid of foundation stitches. If you've done one or the other, you can do the other one. So let's see here. Oh no, Crystalline, her dog jumped on her lap and now she's winding balls of yarn. I think we've all been there. I remember when we first got our puppy, I had a brand new ball of yarn, beautiful new yarn sent to me by a yarn company. I was so excited to try it out. I put it on the couch, went to go grab a drink, and you can imagine what I came back to. I had to write to that yarn company very apologetically and say, I am so sorry. Oop, something went wrong there on this last couple. I had to say something, so sorry, please send me a whole new ball of yarn. I'm going to have to start over. This one is just too much of a mess. He really tore into that one, unfortunately. And the funny thing is, he has not attacked a ball of yarn since. I don't know if my tears were enough to convince him not to do it again, but thankfully since then he has left them alone. But yes, foundation stitches, as Chris pointed out, really are a game changer. It's so much easier to count the stitches themselves than to try and count those little individual chains, especially, I know as I get a little bit older, my eyesight does not want to stare at that long row of chains for very long. And having the foundation stitches is a lot easier to count, and it's just so much stretchier. So I really, once you've gotten the basics of crochet down, I always recommend taking the time to learn some foundation stitches, because I think they really make crochet quite a bit more enjoyable, especially when you have a long first row. And you don't want to have to count out all those individual chains. Alrighty, so let's see where we're at here. I'm going to go ahead and count because I can't talk and count at the same time. I've learned that the hard way many times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So we've got 5 left to go. Like I say, just a little bit easier than trying to count all those individual chains. So there's 1, 2, oop, going off screen a little bit there. Let's say 3. I'm just enjoying the process so much here. 4 and 5. All right, there we are. That should give us our 30 foundation double crochets. You can see here what I love about foundation double crochet. It's really nice. It's really even. I don't have, big gappy chains. I didn't make them too big or too small. And look at that stretch. That is what you want to have when you have something like an ear warmer or a headband or a waistband or even a neckband for that matter. Sometimes with a neckband, you want it to actually be a little firmer and not have as much stretch depending on the design. But any place, hat bands, you want really great stretch. That foundation double crochet is just going to be a really great start. So after you've made your row of foundation double crochet to the length needed for your ear warmer, I'll pull up a little bit more yarn here, we want to join to work in the round. So the way I like to do that is literally just lay out my work right here, get it all on camera, and then I can just bring those ends together. That way I'm not going to get an accidental twist or something like that, which can happen very easily. You just want to bring it together to make it a nice circle there. You can put your hook right in that first stitch we made and slip stitch them together. Now that does leave a little gap right there at the bottom of that first row, but we've got that tail end. We always have that tail end anyway that we need to weave in. So when we put that on our needle, we'll just sew right into the bottom of that last stitch and it cinches them together. Easy peasy, all taken care of. So with that, we're ready for round 2, which starts with a chain 2 that does not count as a stitch. So anytime you're working in the round, I always like to recommend grabbing a couple stitch markers. Grab a couple here. Get my crochet stitch markers ready. There we are. I want to stick to my fingers today. And then we're going to start with our chain of 2. Move my monitor out of the way just a little bit so I can see better. There we are. And then we are going to work a front post double crochet in the next stitch, followed by a back post double crochet in the stitch after that. And that's our repeat that's going to give us this ribbing. So let me pull this a little bit closer here to the camera so we can get a really good view. I've got my chain 2 there. And when I make my foundation double crochets, I start with a chain 2 that does not count as a stitch right there. Got a little fuzzy on it. There we go. So I'm going to ignore that little chain 2 right there, yarn over, and come from the front around the first post there. It's right around that first actual stitch. So whether you chained or made your foundation double crochet, if you've skipped a couple stitches that don't count, or a couple chains, I should say, as a turning chain, you don't want to work a post stitch around those. But other than that, you work it off as a double crochet. Then we come around for the back post double crochet next. We yarn over, come from behind for the next post, around the front of that one, pop out the back of our fabric, yarn over and pull up our loop, and finish our double crochet. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So then that's our repeat all the way around. Front post double crochet around the next stitch, back post double crochet around the next. It's a very simple way to create crochet ribbing. It's probably one of the most basic ways, and it's certainly one of my favorite ways. It's a very quick way to create ribbing very quickly. It's a little bit of a chunkier ribbing. There are, more subtle and thinner ribbings out there, but I really like this method. It's nicely graphic and it really shows off what crochet can do, I think. And it's a great intro to cabling. If you've made ribbing like this with simple front post, back post double crochet stitches, you can work your way up to cabling pretty easily. So let's see here. Reading some comments here in the chat about dogs destroying yarn. Oh my gosh. I am lucky that mine has left mine alone since then, but I guess I am also a little overly cautious, perhaps. The craft room you often see in my videos and things like that, the dog isn't usually allowed down here. He's kind of got his own space upstairs. I keep my craft room a little more pet-free. But that was a policy I had from back when I used to sell finished items. I always like to try and keep them pet hair free, so it has extended to now, but it keeps the yarn safe. Alrighty. We are working our way around, just front post and back post stitches alternating to create that really lovely rib for round 2. And then round 3 is just a repeat of round 2. So we're just extending the ribbing for round 3. Makes that ribbing a little bit taller and wider. And one of the things I always talk about with crochet is that it's very easy to customize projects in crochet. I think that's part of the fun of it, is you don't have to just accept it, kind of off the rack or off the shelf. You can make it your own. So when I say, I repeat that row once to create that ribbing, if it's if it's not something that's going to affect the fit, like it wouldn't for this one, you could add another row. You could do all ribbing. You could leave off ribbing. You could make that ribbing just as wide as you want it to be for your finished item. For this sort of project, it's really the stitch count that matters more than the row count. So you can make it as wide or as narrow as you want it to be, as long as you've got the stitches needed to get around your head. So there we are. We've worked our way around. We've got a back post double crochet around that very last stitch, so we know we're in the right spot. At least, the very least, I have an even number of stitches. And then we can slip stitch to that first stitch again. So if you wanted to, you could be using your stitch markers in your first and last stitch of each row when you're working in the round so that you don't get mixed up with the slip stitch. But of course, it is optional. So then I would simply slip stitch right in that first marked stitch there. And that finishes row 2. And row 3 is exactly the same, or round 3, I should say, as round 2. We're just working those same stitches. When you see a front post double crochet, you work a front post double crochet around it. When you see a back post double crochet, you work a back post double crochet around it. So let's go ahead and switch to round 4. And round 4 starts with a new color. So what do I do when I switch colors with this pattern? I really like to actually not join with a slip stitch, but join with a seamless join. So let me pull up my little bin of supplies here. I'm going to need my scissors, which are over here. So first thing I do, set that hook somewhere so it will stop rolling away. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn about 6 inches or so, like I normally would, to weave in the ends. And you can see I haven't slip stitched to finish this round, so I'm just going to pull up on that end. And then I'm going to use my yarn needle to close up this round. Now, you can see right here, let me get good and centered here. You can see right here, this is the first stitch, and it's the one with the stitch marker in it. I'm going to come over here to this second stitch. You can see it's a back post stitch, and that's where I want to insert my needle right under those top 2 loops. I'm going to go ahead and get the stitch marker out of the way right now. Oops. Put that right back in there under those top 2 loops of the second stitch. Pull it through. And I'm just going to sort of finagle it here so that those yarn strands lay on top of the stitch right there, the one we skipped over. And use my fingers. Just get those strands right on top. See how it's on top of that stitch right there? Then if I go right back into the stitch this yarn is coming out of right here, with my needle, whoop, get it around there, I can pull those loops so that it mimics the other stitches and just lays right on top there. There we are. Sometimes they need a little bit of zhuzhing, but we get it all sorted out. And now we haven't created any extra loops up there, but we get a really smooth look. So from there, you can just weave that end in as you normally would. I'm just going to send it right down in there for now. We'll take care of that later. There we go. So the reason we don't join, if this was the very last round, I might have gone ahead and joined to that first one because it wouldn't matter. But I went and joined to that second one because it creates that second loop, and I don't want to accidentally create any increases. I don't want to fool myself into thinking there's another stitch there when there isn't. So then for what would be round 4, we want to bring in our second color. So today I'm going to be using blue because it's a nice contrast here on camera. Let me find my end. So then for round 4, we join with a slip stitch to the first stitch of the previous round. So I took out my slip stitch, but we know, or my stitch marker rather, but we know that that was that first front post stitch right there, the one that we stitched on top of. So to join with a slip stitch, we just insert our hook right in the top of that stitch, so really under that duplicate stitch we've made, and yarn over and pull up a loop with our new color and simply make a slip stitch. Then we chain 1 and single crochet in the first 9 stitches. So depending on how you've joined and how tight you like to join with your slip stitch, it doesn't seem to want to focus. Look at it. There it goes. Now it's focusing. You can pull down on that end and make it really tight and then chain so that you need to chain 1 again, or you can kind of count that slip stitch join as your chain 1. It's up to you and whatever you're more comfortable with. I've seen it done both ways. So after you've joined and you've chained 1 or joined and counted it as your chain 1, like I say, you single crochet in those first 9 stitches. Now, because I've made sort of a smaller size, I'm just going to do 5, but the idea is the same. Just single crochet in the first few stitches here. So I've gotten to 5, but we're going to say that was 9. Then we half double crochet in the next 10. So on my little guy, I'm not going to do quite as many. But we just half double crochet. So yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. So 3, 4, make sure I'm staying on track here, 5, 6, and then we would continue on for a few more to make 7, or excuse me, to make a total of 10. And then you double crochet in the next 12 or 22 stitches. Remember, there was a 10 stitch difference between our two sizes. We started out with either 50 or 60. So depending on size, you'll double crochet in either the next 12 or the next 22. I won't have quite as many here on my small little doll-sized version. A double crochet, of course, yarn over and go into the stitch, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So this creates, the reason we've got these graduated stitches and the reason I did it that way was to create a wider headband on the top of the head with a narrower section back behind the ears and at the base of the head or the back of the head. So if you wanted a narrower headband overall, you could just use shorter stitches throughout this section. Let me see where I'm at here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So like I say, you would do the double crochets for either 12 or 22, depending on size. And then we go back to the half double crochets and the single crochets to graduate back down, so that those double crochets are essentially in the middle of our row. So I'll do a few more half double crochets here. Oops. Get under both of those loops. We do want to work under both loops for this pattern. Pull up a little bit more of the blue yarn here for myself. Keep putting my elbow on top of it. I think we've all been there. It's getting in my own way. Let's see here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I made one too many of those for my little guy here. Again, you would have a total of 10 half double crochets, and then you would finish it up with 9 single crochets. So 9 single crochets, 10 half double crochets, 12 or 22 double crochets, then back down to 10 half double crochets, and 9 single crochets. I've just got my smaller version right here that I'll finish up. So that puts me right back down in our last stitch. I'm going to go ahead and get that stitch marker out of the way, and then we slip stitch to join round 4. So for round 4, you should have shorter stitches at the beginning and end, and your taller stitches there in the middle, which would be the front center of your headband right over the forehead. So that said, now we are ready for round 5. So for round 5, it is essentially the exact same as the round 4, where we don't have to join again, we don't have to join again, but it is the same as round 4. We chain 1, single crochet in those single crochets, half double crochet in the half double crochets, double crochet in the double crochets, etc. Exactly the same thing as we did for round 4. So I'm going to go ahead and say that round 5 is done as well, because it's exactly the same. But the difference is at the end of round 5, after you've joined with a slip stitch, rather than moving on to the next round right away, first you pull up the working loop and remove the hook. So literally, I want you to pull up on that loop and take the hook out of there. I also want you, though, to take one of those stitch markers and put it through that loop to hold it nice and secure. We want this to stay out of the way, but we don't want that loop to pull back out while we bring our other color back in. We're going to come back to that active loop. So we go back to our first color, color A, whatever color that may be. Let me get a couple of these little things here out of the way so we can have a little bit more room to work here. So with color A, we're going to join to the first stitch of the previous round. Now, thankfully, that's pretty easy to see here. We can see right there is the stitch that we joined to. That is where our slip stitch from the previous round is going into. So right there, we want to go ahead and join and chain 1. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that one down really tight and do my chain 1 right there. And then I am going to work 3 single crochets in the very first stitch. So that's the one we joined to right there. So just hold all this mess over there out of the way. Make sure you've got your working yarn there, not your tail. I've done that a few times. We go right back in that stitch we joined to and work 3 single crochets. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And then we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, skip 4 stitches and 3 single crochets in the stitch after that. So we skip the next 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and work 3 single crochets in the stitch after that. 1, 2, and 3, all in that same stitch. Then we do it again. Chain 2, 1, 2, skip 4 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we work 2 double crochets, a half double crochet, and 2 double crochets in the next stitch. So we did 3 single crochets, chain 2, skip 4, 3 single crochets, chain 2, skip 4, and now we work 1 double crochet, a second double crochet, followed by a half double crochet, and then another double crochet, and 1 more double crochet. So 2 double crochets, half double crochet, 2 double crochets, all in that same stitch. Then we chain 2 and skip 4 stitches and do that again. And that's what we do several times to carry us around the front of the headband or ear warmer until we come back to these guys. So let's do that one more time. We've got our chain 2 already made. We'll skip 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in the next stitch, double crochet, double crochet, half double crochet, double crochet, and double crochet again. Then chain 2 and skip 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is our repeat that takes us across the front of the hat, and the number of times you'll repeat that, as you might imagine, depends. Did you have 10 or 20, or excuse me, did you have 22 or 12 of those double crochets? How big around determines how many times you'll repeat that, either 6 or 8 times total. Then we come back to the 3 single crochets. So we skip 4, and we work 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, 1, 2, skip 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 single crochets. Pull up a little bit more yarn from my skein here. 1, 2, and 3, chain 2, and skip 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we move that out of the way here, we can see there are exactly 4 stitches left to skip. 1, 2, 3, 4, right there. And we're simply going to join with a slip stitch, break our yarn, and finish off. So rather than joining with a slip stitch again, let's go ahead and grab those scissors and cut our yarn. Pull right up on that loop. Pull gently. We don't want to close up that chain itself too much. We just want to pull gently through there so we've got our end. And we can put that on our yarn needle. And now, because this is a chain space, effectively, I'm not going to worry about joining to the second one. I don't need to preserve any sort of, stitch count or anything right here. This is just a chain space. So I'll just go ahead and join to the first one. You could join to the second one if you wanted to, but that's okay. We're going to be treating this as a chain space that we crochet over in the next row. So I'm not overly worried about keeping the stitch count right. I just don't want to put a knot in there. I just want a nice smooth join is my point in using this one this time. So then I'll just send that through there. Of course, I can weave that end in when I'm all done. But all right, for now, I just want to tack it down out of the way. Tuck it down to the inside here. And then we need to go back to that working loop. Remember, we've got that one with all our stitch marker in there, keeping it nice and open. So we can go ahead and untangle that from all your other ends, take the stitch marker out, and now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of take that working loop right there. You can see how we've left the yarn attached to our skein is still attached to the inside here. And we've still got our working loop pulled up nice and big. Just going to use my hook, go right, you see that last actually chain 2 space we made there, right where that loop is. We can just pull that loop right to the front of our fabric. So now our active loop is in front of our fabric in the blue, or in color B. Our working yarn is behind, it's on the inside. Since we've gone ahead and cut that one, it's easy to just go ahead and pull this right to the front. So then we can find our end here and get this back to the right size for our hook. Pull down on there. And with that, we're ready to start crocheting with color B again. So now let's see, we go to, what row are we on now? Row 7. So we have pulled our working loop of round 5 to the front, leaving the working yarn behind, and we've inserted our hook in our loop. So we're ready to start crocheting again. So what we're going to do is chain 1, skip 1 stitch, and single crochet in the next stitch. That can sound really confusing because we've got a couple rows going on here. Where are we going? So we're going to start with our chain 1, yarn over, and chain 1. I'm going to pull this one up just a little bit higher if needed, make it nice and comfy. And essentially, this is kind of hard to see, but if you'll recall, we started out with those 3 single crochets right there that we made in that first stitch. We're going to skip the first one and just single crochet right in that second one. Right in the middle of those 2, or the middle of the 3, I should say, the second one. Just go right in there. So you can see there's our chain 1, just kind of leans up right over it. We've got our single crochet right in the center of those 3. So then what we are going to do is chain 1, skip the next stitch, and we're going to single crochet together twice in round 5. So let's talk about that. We're going to be working down into round 5. We want to enclose this chain 2 right here. We want to cover that up. We don't want to see it in this next row. So we find those 4 stitches that we skipped over, go into the first one, make sure that that chain 2 is on top of your hook. You don't want to push it behind, although you could, but for this, we want to make sure it's enclosed. Definitely don't make sure it's in front. That would be really bad. Yarn over, pull up 1 loop, go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up that loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3. The main thing is you've got that chain 2 up there trapped inside that stitch. Then we do the same thing here. Go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3 to finish, just like that. Then we do it again. We chain 1, skip that next stitch, single crochet in the middle one, chain 1 again, and now we've got these next set of 4 stitches. We want to do the same thing. Go into the first one, yarn over and pull up a loop, go into the second one, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3 for our first decrease, and single crochet 2 together over the next 2. Make sure you're just trapping that chain 2 inside there so that it's mostly hidden. You might have a little hint of color, but that's okay. So that brings us up to our bigger section here, and these are what we're going to be turning into our hearts. So we do the same thing again. We chain 1, but now we're going to skip 2 stitches and single crochet in that half double crochet. We skip over the 2 double crochets, single crochet in that half double crochet, and I like to kind of push those 2 double crochets forward, single crochet again, and skip those 2. Now we're going to half double crochet 2 together twice when we're working in between these hearts. So to do that, we yarn over, go into this next stitch. I always like to sort of angle, let me pull it over here so it's a little easier to see, sort of angle my yarning over yarn over that chain 2 space to sort of just get it right where I want it. Then I can pull up that loop. And then with half double crochets, you've got some options. You can yarn over again and go into that next stitch and yarn over and pull up a loop and pull through all 5 loops. Or if you'd like, after you've gone into that first stitch, you can just go straight into that second stitch. So it's more like a half double crochet, single crochet 2 together. However you like to do it is up to you. I actually like sort of the combo. Again, I designed this pattern in 2015. I think I would have done a few things differently in 2022. But I really like this combination of half double crochet, single crochet 2 together, because I feel like it looks more like an actual half double crochet in the finished stitch. So you can do it either way, whatever works for you. But I'm going to yarn over, go in that next stitch and pull up a loop, and then just go right into that next stitch and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through 4. I just feel like pulling through 4 at the end gives a little bit more of a half double crochet look than pulling through 5 does. It's a little closer to the pull through 3. So there we are. There are 2 half double crochets, 2 together. So then we do the same thing. We chain 1, skip over those 2, single crochet in that half double crochet, chain 1 again, skip over those next 2 stitches, half double crochet, 2 together here. And we would keep doing that until we get back down to the point where we've got between our sort of our heart section and our 3 single crochet sections again. And then we just go back to the single crochet 2 togethers. So you can sort of judge by where you are on the project if you find the written instructions confusing. Then we chain 1, single crochet in the center of those 3 single crochets, chain 1, and back to decreasing over. So I'm going to pull up a little bit more of our blue yarn here so I can finish off our decreases. And those decreases should lead you right up then to the end of this round. So there's that. And then we've got one more set of 3 single crochets. So we chain 1, single crochet in there, chain 1 again. We've got those last 4 stitches there that we skipped over. So we just want to single crochet 2 together twice. And believe it or not, this will actually, with all these extra double crochets and the decreases and things, we actually end up with the same stitch count in every round. So when you're making this pattern, you should have the same stitch count at the end of every single round. So once we've gotten here for round 7, we can go ahead and join with a slip stitch. And we're going to go ahead and join to that very first single crochet you made right there. You don't have to join to the chain 1 or anything like that. And that is what it should look like after round 7. Now I want to point out, these may not look that much like hearts yet. We've kind of got that shape going at the top, but the bottom isn't quite drawn together. When you go back to weave in your ends, I like to actually take an extra bit of yarn, perhaps leaving the green extra long, or I should say whatever color we use to make the actual hearts in. Go ahead and leave that really long. And then when you go to sew in those ends from the inside, you can see I've turned it wrong side out right here. Let me grab a yarn needle. Oops. Let me grab it again. There we go. When you go to weave in your ends, if you've left one of these ends really, really long, what you can do is send it right along the line that you kind of crocheted over here. Right here, these are just our single crochets. I'm not worried about those. Those aren't going to turn into hearts. But when I get over here to where those little hearts are, and again, this is from the inside of the fabric, I like to actually take my yarn needle and gather the bottom of the heart. So you can see there's the bottom of all those stitches. This is the bottom of the 2 double crochets, the half double crochet, and the 2 double crochets. And I'll actually use the end of that yarn to go through those and then through them again. And when you pull that really tight together, and then just continue to weave on along that row and do it on the next one, when I turn that right side out, you can see that right there has really gathered the bottom of that heart-shaped close. And that, I find, is really the key. I've seen so many patterns that use this sort of shell shape to create a heart, but getting that bottom point really tight, when you're just crocheting into the same stitch with a bunch of stitches, you just don't get that tight bottom. I find that when you weave in your end this way, that really is the key to getting that really great sharp look. Like I say, then you just keep going right down that line till you get to the next one, and then you can do the same thing again. So if you just leave one of those ends really long or cut a little extra length if need be, you can come back along and really make those hearts, give them the really nice bottom point that you want your hearts to have. It's kind of a sneaky little trick that I find really helps with any of those patterns where you've got hearts like that. If it's just not giving you that heart shape that you're really looking for, that can be a really great way to get that in there. So with all that said, let's come back to our end here. Now I've turned it wrong side out, and I've actually turned it wrong side out the wrong direction and managed to tangle my end in there. So let me get that figured out here. There we go. Okay. Just had to turn it the right way. Okay, so we get our hook back in there. Then with that, we are ready for round 8. And round 8 is going to be, just basically back to what we've been doing before. We're going to start smoothing it out, basically mimicking the rows we were doing before until we're ready to add our final ribbing. So we chain 1. We start by single crocheting in the chain 1. So that's a little confusing. We actually want to come back and work in, let's see, we were supposed to, you know what? That's because I did something I wasn't supposed to do. After we finish that last two half double crochets together, we were supposed to chain 1 before we join. My bad. I missed that one. There we go. All right. Now we've got our chain 1 and we're joined. So now we can chain 1 again and single crochet right back in that chain 1. Okay. Then we are going to single crochet in the next 8 stitches and chain spaces. So that means when you see a stitch, you single crochet in it. When you come to a chain 1 space, you can single crochet in that chain 1 space. Now we're at a stitch, we single crochet in it. But we just want to make sure that we end up with the same number of stitches in this row that we've had in every other row. So whatever numbers you were following around for your ear warmer on the previous rows, when you were doing the single crochet, half double crochet, we're doing the same thing, but sometimes now we're working into those chain 1 spaces. So we're just reestablishing what we were doing there. So let's see, I've got 3, 4, 5. Got one more half double crochet on my little guy here. And then I go back to my double crochets. Again, double crochets will depend however what size you were making. You can just look at your stitches and crochet into those or the chain spaces all the way around. So after, oops, that was a chain, not a chain space. Let me go into the chain space. I do like to go into the chain spaces rather than chains, but if you prefer the looks of working into the actual chains, of course, you can do that. So let's see, I've got 5 of those. I'll work a few more double crochets here. Let's see, 6. Pull up some more yarn. 7. I'll stop there for double crochets on mine. Then I go back down to half double crochets. We're just creating that slope again. And remember, we just have chain 1s. So when you come to a chain 1 space, it's just a chain 1. It's only 1 stitch worked into that space. And then that's probably 1 more half double crochet for me, and then back down to single crochets. So whatever you were doing before for your single crochets, half double crochets, double crochets, it's the same thing now. We're just sometimes having to work into a chain space. So once you've worked all the way around, then of course you join with a slip stitch. And then round 9 is basically the same thing we did in round 5. Repeat again, chain 1, single crochets, half double crochets, double crochets, half double crochet, single crochets, join, and then finally break. And then we're ready to go back to our other color. So we go ahead and break our yarn. Pull up on that yarn right there. We can do our seamless join again. Now at this point, our stitches are going to matter. We are going to be counting our stitches. So we can join to that second stitch of the round. Just as I did before, just pull that right through. Make sure the yarn sits on top so you can sort of duplicate that stitch. Go right back down to the stitch you were coming out of, right in the middle there. Just take your time, make it look like the stitch you skipped over there, so you can't even tell. And then I like to just take that needle and go right down through the stitch that I skipped. Seems to sort of hold it all together really well right there. So you can't even tell without looking too closely that there's actually a second V right underneath that one. So I'll just tack this one down for later. There we are. And then we're ready to join again. So at this point, you know, if you're having trouble reading your stitches, you might have wanted to stick a stitch marker in there. But I will say round 10, which we're coming back in for, doesn't really matter. If you end up in the wrong stitch for round 10, if you join to the last stitch or the first stitch, doesn't really matter. We're just going to be working double crochets in each stitch around. So there's, you know, like I say, it doesn't matter if you end up in the wrong one or if you're having trouble getting into that one, you can join to whichever one you like. So you can join again with a slip stitch, and then in the instructions it says to chain 2 and then double crochet in each stitch around, so that chain 2 would not count as your first stitch. But if you wanted to take it to the next level, since it is 2022 and not 2015, you could join with a double crochet, which I would hold onto the end of my yarn like this, yarn over twice, and then just insert my hook basically wherever I want for this one, and make my double crochet. Just don't forget to not let go of that end until you've got that first stitch made, or maybe even the second one, if needed, for a little extra stability there. And then you can just continue double crocheting around. Like I said, I didn't actually join in the first stitch this round. It really doesn't matter too much. Oops. Especially since sometimes getting into that stitch you did join to can be a little tricky. There we go. So now we just double crochet all the way around for round 10. And then rounds 11 and 12 are just more rounds of our post stitches. We're just going to work our front post and back post double crochet stitches all the way around for more ribbing on top. But otherwise, it's exactly what you've already seen me do. When we get to that end of that second round of ribbing for our end here, then we just do our seamless join again. And then at that point, like I say, you can join to the first stitch if you want to, or the second. Our stitch count no longer matters. We're not counting our stitches. We're all done. But I really like doing that join at the end, especially because then you don't have that sort of that telltale knot or jog that you can get from the knot that you get when you, you know, do your finishing by making the slip stitch and then breaking the yarn from there. I find it just creates just a little bit more of a jog that is probably something that someone who doesn't crochet regularly would never notice. But, you know, once you start crocheting, you start to notice all those little things. But yeah, so now I'm just double crocheting around, and then it would be another couple rounds of this ribbing. And that is really it. Let me pull this picture back up so you can see that here. Here is the picture of the original. Like I say, unfortunately, several years old, so I no longer have the original piece, but luckily we still have the yarn. Red Heart with Love. You can see the ribbing right there. And you can see right there, there's that little trick I talked about. You just cinch up the bottom of those hearts. Anytime you run across a heart like this in a crochet pattern and you're just not loving the point of that heart, try that trick. Go on the inside when you go to weave in that tail end and cinch up the bottom of those hearts. Like I say, then it's just capped up with a couple more rounds of the ribbing there, and that is it. Pretty simple pattern, but it does have that tricky section there right in the center where we're making those heart shapes. And like I say, that little tip to really gather up the bottom, I think, makes a big difference. So I think that hopefully will help everyone make the Love is Cold ear warmer. We can go ahead and come back to the other camera. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. I know this one was quite a bit longer for a live, but again, I hope that it'll help you make the Love is Cold ear warmer. I hope it'll answer the questions for those for whom it is one of their first crochet projects. There are separate tutorials for the post stitches and the front post double crochet and the foundation stitches on the YouTube channel if you want to see those. Again, this is what we were making, the Love is Cold ear warmer. So definitely check that out. It was a lot of fun to go and revisit that old pattern with you guys. And I hope you'll tune into Moogly for lots of new patterns coming on Friday. I will be sharing the new free pattern coming this Friday. Right now it's February 22nd, so 23rd, 24th, 25th, whatever that is, 25th, 26th. I will have the Lamb Squish free up on Moogly with a video tutorial for that on Monday. So I hope you'll check that out as well. And I hope you'll have a wonderful weekend, and I'll talk to you all again soon. Have a great day, everybody.